I am Marilyn Pedretti. So welcome to my home. It's nicknamed the Straw Hut. When I first talked about building a house like this, everybody's like, oh, you're going to live in a straw hut. And that kind of stuck. So it's the Straw Hut. That's the nickname. Just a little about myself. I am an affiliate, and I think I had celebrated my 25th affiliation maybe last year, but we'll be celebrating it this year at the 40th. My aunt, Sister Teresa Marie Pedretti, was a Franciscan sister from way back, and she got me involved. I was a Shared Horizon volunteer. I did a lot of stuff with the FSPAs before I became an affiliate. And one of the things I did was, through Shared Horizon, which no longer exists, I volunteered in Texas, in El Paso, building straw bale houses along the border. And we were building them then for affordable living, very similar to Habitat. The families had to build their own home. And I worked with Habitat here, went down there, learned about straw bale, and I thought if they do that in Texas to keep the heat out, because Texas is unbearably hot, why can't I do that in Wisconsin to keep the heat in the winter? So I planned for probably 4 years this house. My family thought I was nuts, and it's one of those things, a lot of people think I'm nuts, but I am, but that's beside the point. A lot of people just have that concept of a straw hut. And so I open my house up all the time to tours and to people who are interested. I've had people from Japan, Germany, Holland, I mean, all over, because they don't understand. They think it's a hut, and you walk in this house, and I'm a little prejudiced, but I say, it's just so peaceful. It's sound absorbing, it's just a peaceful way to live. And so people then have a better understanding. I think part of it also is when you think straw hut, you think very primitive, outdoor plumbing, that kind of stuff, and it's not. And because I am off-grid, which means I am not plugged into the electric company, I live off that solar panel you see outside. That's my energy source. They also think that it's very primitive, and it's not. I mean, you walk in the house, you would not know, right? Unless I told you, you wouldn't know what the walls were made of. So, John, if I could have you turn around and open up that little chalkboard. This is my truth window. And this tells the truth about what my walls are made out of. Every straw bale house has a truth window somewhere in their house. This chalkboard was something we used as kids. And so we retrofitted it and put it right in the wall. But that's the truth. That's what my walls are. It's not fake. I have a little bit hard time when people call it a hay house. And I know Joe's article, which you connected to on the webpage, he talked about being a hay house. And I was like, it's not hay. So us farmers know the difference. Does anybody know the difference between hay and straw? I do. So hay is green. It's a living material that animals eat, right? It decays, it molds, it stinks if you get it wet. Straw is a waste product. You cut off the wheat, the oats, the barley, whatever's on the top, and then there's this waste product. Farmers use straw for bedding. In Texas, they had some farms out there, they would burn it because they had no use for it. So it makes perfect sense. It's a waste product, put it in the walls. Use it for absorption, for keeping the heat out. So there's a definite difference. So it is straw, it is natural. People are like, oh, you must have fire retardants on it. And that is the number one thing. People assume my house is going to start on fire in an instant because it's straw, right? It actually won't. There's a house in Nebraska it's been like 100 years old. They had an electrical fire, and the only air it was getting was behind the electrical outlet. So it was smoldering, and they could smell smoke, but they couldn't find it. And it went on for days. So it's like starting a phone book on fire. It's so condensed and so tight. As long as there's no air in there, you can't. So a stick-built house, which is your typical 2x4 or 2x6 house, actually is a great fire thing because it has these cavities that have air that will just increase the fire. You would be hard-pressed to start this house on fire. I also have a metal roof. So if there was a forest fire, I'm fairly protected. And I actually got reduced insurance rates because I could prove it. So there are two different places, Colorado University and the Department of Energy both did studies on straw bale and how fire resistant they are. So there are some good to that. The other thing people say, oh, you must have mice. Tell me where a mouse is going to get in here. These walls have about 1.5 inches of stucco on them. Okay? My brother keeps saying he's going to put a little plastic mouse in that window one of these times just to freak me out. There's no way for them to get in. I've been here, I moved in 2008. It took me about a year and a half to build. So I moved in about 2008, and I have not had mice in here. The only time I did was when I brought it in with my wood. And it was in the wood that I have the wood stove for. And I'm like, oh. So it is fireproof, it's natural. There's no chemicals on it, it's enclosed. The house was designed to work with nature, not against her, okay? So I have the overhangs. In the summer, it keeps the sun out. In the winter, it's designed exactly so the sun comes in and warms up my house. Metal roof, it's certainly much more environmentally friendly than tar, than the oils that you see in roofing. It is gonna last me my lifetime. I'm not gonna worry about it, at least 50 years. I'm not gonna worry about it. Other things like the houses, or the bedrooms are to the north. That's usually the cooler part, and that's, you sleep better with that. I've designed it so the windows open up on top. So at night, I open up the bottom windows on the north side and the top windows on the south side, and that cool air comes in from the woods and then escapes all the cold. So I'll close this up on a really hot day in the morning, and it'll stay at 73, 74 degrees. Now, June was a little difficult. We had 3 weeks, who would have thought in June, 3 weeks, 90s, did not cool down at night. I had a little bit of a hard time by the third week keeping this house cool. But on a day like this, I open it up. This is all good. So, other ways to work with nature, the flooring is cork, and cork is made from a cork tree. You don't kill the tree, you take the bark off, the cork keeps growing. So it's a natural product. I have in-floor heat, so I have little tubes in the floor that heat up the water, and your feet are warm all winter long, which is wonderful, and heat naturally rises. Drives me nuts when I see heating vents in the ceiling, because your heat's just in the ceiling. It takes a lot to bring that down. The wood, like this is a hackberry. It was milled right here in Holman. It's a swamp wood, and it's a beautiful wood. And I had my nephew, this was his senior project in high school, was to build this without using any chemicals or glues or anything. And it was a trick for him, and he and his teacher worked on it. It wasn't hard, but it's like, oh, we can build this without using. Your kitchen is one of your most dangerous rooms in a new house, because all those cabinets have formaldehyde and glues and off-gassing that lasts for several years. And so people do what's called new house sickness. They will get sick from it. So this is all natural. So this is a hackberry. And then the shellac is made out of dead bugs. It's actually an eco-friendly shellac. And so things like that. Things, try to use as much natural that I can. All the lighting and things in here are from the Habitat Restore. I always give a plug for the Restore. Just about all my furniture is from the Restore. It's like it's a win-win-win. People can donate there. They don't throw it in the trash. People get to buy it for cheap, and it comes into a house and it's less than the landfill. So it's always a wonderful thing to look at Habitat before you buy something new. The bathroom, when you go in there, the tub is from 1897. The sink is from 1895. The sink was from a barber shop in Trempealeau. You may have remembered it. It is one of those things you just took a little bit of ingenuity to fix it up to get it the faucets for today, because the faucets were rather old and stuff. So that bathroom is like all recycled or renewed or reused materials in there. I had a group from church help me build these bookshelves. And when you get a chance, please go out to the porch out there and see the view. That porch was built on purpose. Your worst sun is your afternoon sun. And so that's the side of your house you want to put trees or some kind of shading, or put a porch so that the heat doesn't hit your building and then heat up your house. That takes a long time to cool down. So again, working with nature. The deck is the composite out there. It's recycled wood and plastic. I never have to replace it, never have to do much of anything with it. And then I just kind of landscape naturally around it. I was in the landscaping business for a while, and so everything you see out there was somehow from a job that somebody was throwing away. Let's see, what else was working with nature? Okay, so like I said, I have the solar panel out there. When you go the tour, there's a wire that runs under my house that goes into this back room. And in there is the battery system. And then there's it's an inverter that converts that battery into electricity. So again, once you walk in the door, you wouldn't know it that I'm off grid because of all that system. Also in this back room is the hot water heater, and it's the on-demand. It heats it up as it goes through the coils, and it goes back to the bathroom. I was explaining, it takes about 15 seconds to get back to the bathroom but it's not that bad. You know, you do your dishes, you heat it up as you're doing your dishes. You don't need hot water just sitting there waiting for you. I have a very energy efficient washing machine for clothes, but then I use drying racks for drying. I have racks in there. I have some that sit by the fireplace. In the winter when I have a fireplace going, they'll dry it in an hour. You know, it doesn't take much. And then I have a clothesline on the back porch that goes out across. So using nature the best. It saves money and it saves energy. So like I said, I moved in 2008. I have been off-grid. I use about 2.8 to 3 kilowatts of power a day. What do you think a typical house uses per day? 40. It's about 30 per day. And it's just rethinking things. We have what we call vampire appliances in your house. Things that are plugged in are using electricity even though you aren't using it. So there are things like that you just, you know, rethink. I don't do laundry at night, you know, because that takes a lot of power. But in the day, if I'm doing laundry, then it pulls the sun in, then I use a few more kilowatts of power. Easy peasy for me. So it's just rethinking how you use your power. Okay, so we got the utility room, the bathroom. The bedrooms were designed so that the windows have the airflow straight across. I have a little bit bigger windows than you should in Wisconsin on the north side because that's where a lot of your heat will escape. But I put window quilts on in the winter. All these get window quilts. I have the summer look now. I wanted to do them like this window quilt. I had a friend that made that for me. It was like $300. I thought, that gets kind of expensive. So I just went to the company store and bought actual quilts. Made a little hole, you know, holes on them so you can hang them up. Easy. Again, just kind of rethinking how we do stuff. But the windows are in line with you know, getting a nice airflow. Plus, no matter where I go in the house, I can look outside, which, I mean, I am blessed. This is the perfect paradise spot to live, I think. It's just, and I hear all kinds of things at night. You know, you'll hear coyotes, but I'll hear a raccoon walking through my backyard. There's deer. I woke up one morning, I was sitting in my chair doing my morning prayers. I look out and there's turkeys right there. Right there, and I took a picture and people couldn't believe it. I have turkey hunters that are like, what? Where are they when I'm looking for them? So I am definitely surrounded by nature, which is a good thing and it could be not so good. I have a raccoon problem in my sweet corn and I have a bunny problem, something fierce. I was going up and down the driveway today, getting my stocks in, putting my vegetables in the stand. And I saw 5 or 6 rabbits. I'm like, yeah, you just keep nibbling away. So I live close to nature. I have to kind of assert for that, but my brother has actually put a trap out for the raccoon because they are destructive. I don't know why they do it. They wreck the corn and they take one bite.
And years ago, weren't they under your house, for starters? You had something under your house.
Oh, thank you for reminding. So I had to skunk-proof my deck. Who would have thought? They love to get under decks. So my nephew, I hired him, it was like the second summer. It was horrible. I couldn't be on that back porch because they were living under there. So we started here and we took the landscaping away and put a 15-inch screen all the way down the ground and buried it. They don't work real hard at it. It had to go all the way around the house and all around the porch, and that got them out. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. I live with nature, yes. I don't want them under my porch. What kind of questions do you have about the house?
And then never lose power when we have power outages under the storm?
No. Well, there was a brownout about 2 weeks ago, and I was out there in my garden, and my neighbor said, "Did your electricity go out?" And I looked at her. She said, "What?" I said, "You know I'm off grid." "Oh, yeah." My parents' my mom's went out, my brothers went out. Yeah, I didn't have a problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any battery storage?
Yes. In this back room, I do have a battery storage. I used to have the L10s. They're the ones you see in a golf cart. And it was one of those things. I've been working with Remus Battery on Bryce Prairie. They're really great to work with. I went with an industrial size so I don't have to worry about all the little nuances that come with those because there were like 12 of them. And I had one that went bad and they bring all of them down and stuff. I work for the town of Holland. I'm the town clerk. So as part of that, I've been there almost 20 years. I talked to the building inspector as I was doing my research and was telling him stuff. He said, "I don't know about that." So I bring in the papers that would explain about this or that. Like he wanted me to put on the outside the vapor barrier, which is a big no-no for straw bale because you want the walls to breathe. You know, so I had to convince him that I didn't need the vapor barrier. So I had to bring in some articles. The post and beam was a little bit unusual for him, but that's the same as like a log cabin. Sure. A little unusual. How do you do the electrical and stuff? So we had it all worked out. In Texas, we didn't have to do anything special with electricity. It just went down in the walls and we put a little 2x2 behind it to hold the plug in somewhere. He wanted the conduit. So like, I'll do conduit. You know, if that's what we need, I'll do it. But, you know, I would just bring in the research. But I did enough talking ahead of time to help him along the way. And then once it came to the inspection, he's like, oh, this is perfect, you know. So, yeah, that is probably very hard to do something like this in the city of La Crosse. It would be difficult. You'd just have to bring that research in and talk about codes.
Right, because don't you get your building permits through the county level?
You get your zoning permit at the county. The building permit comes from your municipality. Yep.
Are there bales in the attic also?
You can do bales in the attic. It's very hard. You have to have a very strong truss system. I did not want to go that route. There is also, this is a post and beam, so wherever you see a window is a 4x4 post, okay? And then it's called infill, and then I infilled the straw bale. So my brother had a chainsaw, hard to believe he used a chainsaw to build a house, and he would notch the little 4x4 out of the bale, wherever this bale was going to sit. So we called him the Nacho Man. And so you just kind of place those in, and then there's a regular truss system. So the walls, a typical stick-built house, a 2x4 stick-built house, has an R factor of about 15. An R factor is resistance to heat and cold. The old farmhouse probably has an R factor of about 10, okay? This has an R factor of 42. That's how much. It could be higher, but I have too many windows. You know, it could be higher than that. So it resists the heat and the cold that much more. And in the ceiling, I start out with a 35, then I end up with a 40. Because that's really where you lose your heat is the thing. But it's a lot of work. Now, the other way to build a straw bale house is what's called a load bearing. You put the walls up first, and then the trusses sit on the bales. So very hard to do, in my opinion. There are a lot of load-bearing walls in the Southwest. Straw bales are very popular out there because it's an easy thing to build. It looks very Adobe. I think some of my walls look more Adobe than not. And it's a waste product, and it keeps out the heat. They do a lot of the load-bearing. You put that weight of the trusses on there and you could blow out a wall and then you got to start all over, and I just didn't want to do that. And it was going to be really hard to get through building inspection, get through code. So that's the two. And I do have some books, and I'll pull those out in a minute, that show some pictures. There's a yoga studio out in, I think it's Nevada. It's beautiful, and they show it's like $1 million studio. Carol Burnett has a straw bale house. There are a lot of them out in the Southwest. However, there are a lot of them in Nebraska from the late 1800s because they didn't have trees. There weren't trees. They are still standing, and the books have some pictures of that. They're still standing. If you keep keep the good hat and good boots, right? You keep the water off the bottom and you keep the water off the top, the straw bale should last forever. I mean, it's not going to deteriorate.
Are you on slab?
Yeah, I did not build a basement because I wanted the in-floor heat, and I think basements are kind of just a space to put stuff. I have Christmas decorations and things I use every once in a while up above. I try not to accumulate a whole lot. When I need something, whatever, I try to get rid of something, try to live that simple enough, exchange things that I don't need for what I do. I don't need a lot of storage. A lot of people, that's what your basement becomes. The other thing is, people are like, aren't you worried about a tornado? And I guess you can always worry about everything. I mean, there could be a bomb or whatever. These walls are pretty daggone thick. I'd probably lose my roof in a tornado, but I'm not sure that the walls would blow off, because that's usually what happens. It kind of blows up. Then it is what it is. God will, maybe I'll be at the banquet table with Jesus all that much sooner, but I love where I live. I love where I live. And I just think basements are a waste. Now, if I go about 3 or 4 days of clouds, like we've had the smoke cover, I still get solar power. But if it's really like October, where it's the dark clouds and nothing comes through, I can go about 5 days without, a good amount. Then if I get a sunny day, I'll get about 5.5 kilowatts a day until it's back up to 100% again. So it pulls in a lot. The winter, I probably go about 3 days without sun because of the in-floor heat. That electricity's running, because it's not a lot, but it's constantly moving the hot water around, so it will use a little bit more. I have a generator out in the garage. It is hooked up underground to the house. All I gotta do is go out there and start it, come in here, read a book for 2 hours, and my batteries are back. So I try not to use it. It does use fossil fuels, but I will. I want to make sure I have the refrigerator running and lights are on. Yeah.
Do you use any other fuels?
I use LP, and LP is for the in-floor, and you'll see a tank in there. That's just for the in-floor. That makes sense to have a tank because it's running constantly. You don't want an on-demand for that. It's for my hot water, so for dishes and showers. And What else is it for? Oh, and I have it for the generator. The generator runs on LP, which is a cleaner fuel than gas. So that tank that's sitting out back is, what, 300 gallons? I fill that up about once every, it's a little less than a year, probably once every 10 months. So my utility bill is about, whatever that is, $300 to $500 depending on gas prices. That's my utility bill. I don't pay electric bill. I don't, I don't have to worry about any of those other things, which is beautiful.
Who installs your generator?
I did. It's just a simple 7,500 watt generator. It sits up. It's one you'd use for a construction site. Yeah.
Is your stove gas?
That's the other thing. I knew there were three things. Thanks, Marilyn. That runs on gas. Now, I do not have this pilot on in the summer. It's always, well, number one, it's always off gassing, right? I use the stove a lot more in winter. I do a lot of cold meals in the summer. And when I do have hot meals, I go to my mom's house and we have dinner together. So we'll make potatoes and stuff. And it sounds really silly, but I just don't want to heat up the house, number one. And I just find that there's so many good vegetables in the summer, and I like them raw more than anything, other than potatoes. Potatoes aren't so good raw. But just about everything else, yeah, I know. It's one of those things.
On a barbecue. I mean, you can do a lot on a barbecue grill.
You can. Yeah, and being vegetarian, I don't need to cook meats. So to me, it's really easy.
There's no microwave.
Yeah, and I'll once a week or once every other week, I'll turn the stove on and make hard-boiled eggs or prep some stuff ahead of time. But it sounds kind of weird, but that's just me.
How many square feet?
Inside, it's 1,200. Outside, it's almost 1,300 because the bales are 18 inches wide, so it does take up a bit of room. That's why the inside walls are not bale. As somebody else asked me that, it's just a 2x4. It would take up a lot of room inside your house. You certainly could build the whole thing, but
There's no reason to.
there's no reason. A few 2x4s on the interior is not bad. So the other thing I forgot to talk about is this. This is called American clay. So another off-gassing in people's houses is paint. And they're making paints now that are much more environmentally friendly. But be sure to touch the walls when you come through. So this is a clay that's out of the dirt, out of the ground. It's just a regular clay. And the pigments for the color are made from flowers or things like that. So like a yellow would be maybe a sunflower. Can't remember what the red was. But the pigments are all natural. Everything is natural. On the exterior, because of the weather and such, it is a regular stucco made from cement. I had to do that on the exterior because in the Southwest, this would work outside. But here where we have so much rain and snow and humidity, not so much. But it's very soft. It absorbs sound. It absorbs dust. It absorbs moisture, and then it wicks it back out. So I think it's a wonderful treatment to have on your walls. So you'll see that in the bedrooms and everything too. And it's just a really thin, you had to do a couple layers of, like thin coats on it.
Was that something you did yourself, or did you find somebody to do
No, I
that?
did it myself. So I did a lot of research beforehand, and I went to a class in Minneapolis at a natural store that had this. This was their product. And I spent a whole Saturday learning about the product and learning how to use it and stuff, and then I bought it from them. And I was a little bit leery of the red walls, but I think that was the right color. I had a friend pick that out for me. I think that was the right color.
Beet juice.
It could have been. Could have been.
So do you ever have to replace it, or do you ever have to add on?
Okay, so every house settles. And so at about the 3 or 4 year mark, I did on the outside a couple of fixes. You'll see like right there along the window seats, wherever two joints meet is where you're going to see a crack. And so at the 3rd year, I filled in some of those. Well, then the house keeps settling, and I haven't done it since. And I probably should. All it would take, and this is really weird, is to spray it, get it nice and soaked, and then just to keep rubbing it until it goes back together. But in the summer, I'm a little busy, and then in the winter, I kind of find other projects to do, and it's like, I should do this. But it's really, like, if I got a stain here, like I accidentally got beet juice or something on here, again, I would wet it, go in circles, and it disappears. Crayons, things like that the kids use, just wipe them out.
Do you preserve your vegetables for winter also?
I do, but I use my mom's basement. I want to build a root cellar here, and I'm working on it. I'm working on the plans.
You can.
Yeah, well, I wish. The problem is I work out in the garden from like 7 in the morning till 9 at night, and by 9 I'm not ready to can. But on Sundays, my sister and I try to do a few things. We'll do some pickling and things like that. I just don't. But it is certainly a possibility. But things like potatoes, squash, things like that store really well. My mom has a root cellar that I kind of borrow. Yeah, that is the one thing I do miss about. But I'm, because I've got a nice hillside here. I'm trying to imagine how to build one, and yeah.
How many bales of hay?
Straw.
Straws.
Zero.
Yeah. I bought 250 bales for my brother-in-law, and he baled it was just north of the farm up here. And it was 100 and some degrees. It's always hot when you bale straw. And so I got to pick out which load I wanted. So I got this load, put it in the middle of the house. We had the roof on, and then worked from there. And I didn't use them all. And some were mistakes, some fell apart. So probably I would say 200 bales for the whole house. I would say. And it really didn't cost much. I mean, much cheaper than siding and insulation and all that fiberboard or things you have to put on the drywall. It was just so easy.
Are they on edge or flat?
Flat. Yep. So that is a bale. You're sitting on a bale there.
How did you get it rounded then? Do you put like a
Yeah.
chicken wire or something?
So on the openings only, we're wire. Did put wire. Now in Texas, the first house we built, we put chicken wire and everything, and it was a pain to get that chicken wire tight, to get things in there. And then we started like, I don't know, we need it, because people said you needed it to keep the stucco in. And then we started experimenting, and by the time we built our 9th house down there, we weren't using chicken wire except on the entrances and that. So I wanted the adobe, like I wanted the round look. Down there they wanted square. They wanted to look American, which was interesting. So we had to really square things out. So the wire is attached to the 4x4, and then it goes around, and you stuff any open spaces with straw. Mm-hmm.
I like it.
I do too. Actually, that's why I made my closet doors are all rounded. I like the adobe, the softer look than the squares.
Where did your windows come from?
Great question. So I built my garage first to experiment with it, because I hadn't built up here. I built in Texas, and I was going to do 9-foot walls. You know what? Bales only go 8.5 feet. So it was going to be either like a 10-foot wall, or it's going to be at 8.5. So I'm glad I did that first. And then I started going to auctions and things. So I went to the LABA, what's the La Crosse Area Building Association. They have an auction or a sale every spring of contractors donate it, and the money they raise goes to sports. That door is about a $7,000 door from Pella, and I got it for $800 at that. It was a bear to move, I will tell you. So then I started storing things in there. So that stove was in a shed a friend of mine had. Were you interested? I'm like, yes. It was, a mess, and I had to shine it up, but it was perfect. Get new piping was in the storage in the garage. So a lot of stuff went in the garage to store. I think all the back windows were from a company, Beaver Builders up here. They had an order that was returned. I'm on it, and a guy worked there, and he knew I was looking for windows. You could spend 10 grand in windows easy, and I spent a couple, maybe $2,000.
Are they single pane?
No, they're double.
Okay.
I wish I could do triple, but that was really expensive, with the air gun gas and all that, but yeah. I know there's a house that WTC built in La Crosse that has all that fancy window stuff, and I'm like, ooh, wow, I would like that. Looking back, when you asked, that might have been the one thing I might have researched windows a little bit better. I was thinking, I'm getting a good Pella door, which is great, but to go that one step up, that is where I lose my heat.
Blasco.
Yes, I have heard of them.
Blasco windows.
Yeah. And if I have to replace this, that's what I would do. I would upgrade to that, because your windows, the R factor on that is ridiculous, and that's why the window quilts are important at night especially. So my brother runs the farm. We have 250 acres, and he still uses chemicals. I'm working on them, but he does. But his fields are all of here. And then down there was our pasture land. When we were growing up, we had dairy, and we would send the cattle down. We only had like 5-6 head of beef, so he now hays that. He goes down there when it's dry enough. In the spring, that'll be underwater, and I'll have ducks and geese and sandhill cranes. It's like a lakefront. I'm like, I wish I had a lakefront all the time. But it's very swampy. If you walk down there, it can be very swampy. So we picked this little spot because this was a corner. His crops weren't growing well anyway. And I wanted to build up on the hill. That was my first spot. He didn't want me in the middle of the farm, but on the north edge. I was like, okay, I'll go wherever you want. And I am glad he picked this versus that, because then that subdivision went in shortly after. I'm like, oh, this is a much better spot. So when I first started gardening, what I did was I moved back home, and my mom, we had a garden all the time, right? And it was at the farm. My mom was getting it smaller and smaller, and she was just getting to the point she couldn't, do it anymore. So I kind of took it over and I started making it bigger and bigger. Well, we had leftovers. It was just for family. When we started having leftovers, I put a picnic table out by the side of the road, put stuff out. Then it grew into, I had a little veggie stand my nephew built for me. And then it kept growing and growing. And then when I first moved in here, I asked my brother, I just want 2 acres here, just 2 acres. No. He was harvesting and couldn't get through the driveway because I had so many customers. He said, you're moving. I said, okay. So this is my 4th year here in this spot with a garden. He helped me plat it out where we were going to go. I wanted it over more, but he just gave me the 2 acres. I wanted more like 4. But I'm kind of glad because 2 acres is probably enough for one person. And we platted it out. He helped me get it all established as far as where I was going to go. And then he farms around it. But you'll notice a big area I have to mow, which I hate mowing. I think it's a waste of time. But it's designed to keep any chemicals he might have on his field from crossing into my garden. Okay, so it's a buffer. I think there's a better word for it. So we'll see that when we walk around. Again, I'm chemical free. I can't call it organic because he's too close. And there's a lot of certification to go with it. And it's just, I think, just a name. I'm very natural. So instead of putting chemicals like on the potatoes to keep the potato bug off, which is what your potatoes, when you buy it, not yours, but when you buy them in the store and they're not organic, they use tons of chemicals on potatoes. It is probably the dirtiest fruit or vegetable out there. I go out for 2 weeks straight, about an hour, hour and a half, and pick the bugs off. I have a little bucket of soapy water. I just kind of push them in the soapy water. It's tedious, but I figure an hour of my time, how much does chemicals cost to spray? So you're spending an hour, but you're probably paying, if you were spraying it, $30 for that chemical, and you still have to spray everything, which takes time. I still think I'm ahead of the game. So the same thing with all the other kind of bugs and whatever. There are some things I can't. They get to the plant, the little pumpkin bug. Sometimes I get ahead of it, sometimes I don't. It all is what it is. So it's a natural garden. Start out building these raised beds here thinking I would do like some earlier crops and stuff, and I'm starting to turn them into herb beds instead. I do have some early crops like lettuce and whatever. I have a CSA, Community Supported Agriculture. They pay at the beginning of the season, and then I provide them a box of whatever is in that season. If I do well with corn, they get great corn. If it's a bad year for corn, they don't get so much. And they all understand that. So I have 3 CSAs I have to fill today. So once you guys leave, I'm going to be busting to get all that done. And they love it. And I put in herbs in theirs and stuff like that. So I've got, a few herbs here, but I've got a couple that when you walk around, you'll see they're really overgrown. It's all cosmetic at this point because I'm going to dig them up and start doing herbs. So ignore the weeds that you see there. Then I took asparagus that we had down at the farm and transplanted up here. We had raspberries at the farm and transplanted here. But my big jewel is the last thing you see up there is the grapevine, and it's my grandpa's grapevine. Oh. We had Concord grapes always growing up. He had this grapevine, it was huge, and it would grow up in the pear tree. It's just gorgeous. He never had trouble with birds, but I do, so I had to put the netting on. He never netted anything, and he had lots of grapes. So I'm really happy that that survived. It was huge in the ground. I had to go like 6 feet around, and but I got my grandpa's grapevine. Then I built that shed there the first year because I knew I wanted to have the tools and stuff not in my garage. We call it the she shed. That's where I have my tools, where I store stuff. You can see where I have potatoes I dug. I just dug up something new, the Purple Majesty potato. It's purple on the outside and the inside, quite fun. So that's kind of my staging area where I dry onions, I have garlic in there, that kind of stuff. So be sure to walk through that. And then it just starts going down. I have 9 plots. I have them numbered, and I rotate crop. So I try not to do vine crops in the same area for 3 years. So it's a rotation. So it's kind of keeping a little bit of bookwork. But I have paths. I put them into plots on purpose, and I have paths that fit this lovely gator that a friend of mine found for me, and I would not have done this without it. It's not that I don't mind walking, but it takes forever to go from that back end to this end. And whereas I can get to the gator, I forgot this supply, go get it, come back, People want more corn, I run out, I go, run, get the corn. But you have to pick and choose. Yes, I could use a wheelbarrow and be less fossil fuel, but sometimes you have to figure out, but then there's all this time walking back and forth, So.
How much help do you have with your garden, or is it just you?
I will say this spring I had a planting party with the potatoes because it was weird spring, right? We had the freezing, we had the night, and I needed to get the potatoes in the ground, and I was wonderful. I asked a couple of my family members, so we had like 5 people here for a potato planting. It was cold, we were shivering and putting the potatoes in the ground. The potatoes is the first section, you'll see how big it is. Every once in a while, like I need to do something, I need a second hand, I'll call my sister, she lives on the other side. She's just great to come and help me when I need it. But for the most part, it's me, pulling weeds, pulling weeds, pulling weeds.
How's your groundwater check out? Pretty good?
Yes, we have a nitrate problem up here. Mine came out below 10. I think it was a 7.5, but the farm came out at 11. And it's not that far apart, so you tell me what the difference was. Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's the soil here, and quite frankly, all these subdivisions we have and what they put on their lawns doesn't help.
No, true.
Yeah.
How long have you had bees?
So the bees are a friend of mine. They live just north of here, and he's a hobbyist. He learned from Bob Huffman. And I used to have 2 hives, and he would bottle it up and I would sell it in the stand. Well, as you know, bees have had a hard time surviving, and so he's just putting 1 out this year, and he has more up there. I do have honey in the stand, but it's from somebody else who has a bee hives in a subdivision. Yep, and I have some rain barrels. I was explaining that the rain barrels are really nice. I use them to water around here. I was getting close with the last drought in June when we went 3 weeks without rain, but I had enough water. So we could just like take a nice little stroll. I could point out what I have if you have questions, but again, it's all natural as can be. Right. But you can see the raspberries. They didn't do well this year. I think they got stunted with the cold May. They're just awful. No, that's asparagus. Asparagus, and there's asparagus. And had I learned, if I thought about it sooner, I wouldn't have put raspberries so close to asparagus because it does invasive. Raspberries keep going in. Right. And this is nice to have the tree line along here for the shade. When it's 90 degrees out, I need a little shade every once in a while. So I'll go out and hoe and then come in the shade and drink water. So this is my pumpkin patch. I got a few weeds on the north end or south end, but you know, it's just cosmetic at this point. I'm not going to worry too much about it. But that'll be, I do a farm foolery in September where I have a big harvest festival at the farm. People come to the farm, I sell pumpkins and squash and you know, anything that's in produce. And then my sister has a craft barn up in the barn. We do hay wagon rides, we have games for kids. We usually have a couple alpacas that we bring out for kids to pet and stuff. It's just like a big harvest day. When is Second Saturday of September.
Yeah,
yes, public is invited. Oh, yeah.
Money.
Yeah, spend money. Oh, we have homemade pie slices. That's the big, it's self-serve. Yeah. So this is a tomato patch. It was beautiful last Tuesday. I wish you had been here. The winds came and everything went flap. And I've got to restring it. You know how much time it takes? I have 125 tomato plants. You think I'm going to have some tomatoes?
How many different varieties?
I have 6 varieties this year. I kind of go with what a lot of people like. I try to figure out, I always try one new variety. This year was a lemon boy. It's a yellow tomato. And then I have the peppers on both ends. This is a hot pepper roll. The other one is the bell pepper roll on the other end. And this is my squash patch. Only half of the plants came up this year. Wow. I've never had such a bad year of germination. I think it was the cold weather. And then, I don't know, it's just, I had just nothing. And I actually replanted a couple that I had extra seeds, but it's not near what it should be. It should be all filled in, but it'll be what it is. You'll see a lot of bee activity in here. The flowers are just perfect right now. So this is the sweet corn patch, and that's a sweet corn. I usually grow a couple of my plots are sweet corn. I have to keep rotating them. The raccoon know when the sweet corn's ready 2 days before. They just know it. So I am learning to actually fence it in when I start seeing it tasseling out. They aren't going to get in, right? So they didn't get in until we had the storm. The storm shorted something, they got in. Once they get in, they get to taste, they don't care. They're going to get electrocuted. So they have been in there. So my brother set up a trap. Hopefully we can catch the little critters. There's a lot of raccoons out here. This is my next patch that'll be ready right here. You can see the starting to crawl away from the corn or whatever. That patch up there is almost done. That's what I'm going to be picking out today. That'll probably be done today. So I'm hoping this will be ready by tomorrow or Friday at the latest. So, and every once in a while people go, no, sweet corn. I'm like, sorry, we're in between crop. I can't make it do what it's not going to do. But I have enough, I time it, I do different plantings, that it should go till mid-August. This right here was an experiment. I have done some of these where I'd take a plot out for a year and do the green manure. You need to give the plot a little bit. So I experimented this year with pea, soybean, and clover. And the peas kind of came up, but that was about it. And now it's just a big weedy patch. The problem is this knoll. You can almost see how that sweet corn's a little lighter. You can see a line that comes through this knoll, and I can't get anything to grow on it. So I'm trying to figure out what nutrients I can get back into the ground to help this grow. So I'm always experimenting, always learning something new or trying something out and finding out that I did it wrong or whatever. And that's one of them. Next you're gonna see this is the autumn corn. This is a big seller at Farm Foolery. It's a pretty colored corn. And then I have some sunflowers just for looks. People like to take pictures around sunflowers. This is what I call my early garden. It has all the things in it for my CSA, radish, cabbage, broccoli. I have cucumbers back there, zucchini, okra. Now you either love it or hate it. I have a customer that she will buy me out every time she comes here. And other people are like, ooh, that's gross. So okra is this row right here.
Oh, the dark green?
Yeah, so I've got green and red okra. And this is new for me this year is the melon patch. What's new is putting down the fabric.
Oh, yeah.
Melons get so hard to weed because the weeds come up everywhere. They don't have a good cover.
You just hate to waste.
This is a new sunflower. It's called the Mammoth. And again, last week was beautiful. I lost a lot in the windstorm, but it's still manageable. And then this is my beneficial garden. This little short garden here, and I move it around, and it has plants in it that are beneficial to bring the good insects in. And then I also have some dill. Now these sweet potatoes look pretty sick because the rabbits are eating them. I've never had that. They'll start at one end and work their way in. And then that's my potato patch, and I'm digging it up. You can see a lot of blank space now. That's where the potatoes, that's a big area. And that sweet potatoes there too. So that's kind of the overview. So this is my stand. It's all self-serve honor system. So if people want to cheat and steal, that's between them and God. I work really hard. Most people actually leave more than. I've had people say, you work so hard, I'm throwing in an extra $1. I was like, well, I'll take it, thank you, you know. I have a price board in there, I have bags, I have little containers for the cherry tomatoes, you know, I try to make it accessible for everything. I want to live close to the earth, but I also want to help other people understand that it's a beautiful way to live, so that's why I open my house. But with the garden, it's people in this neighborhood who've never had something fresh from the garden. They love it, and this is good, and maybe they'll start a garden in their backyard. So that's my hope, and that's why I do what I do. I'm an affiliate just naturally because I believe the Franciscan sisters are, they're always one step ahead of everybody. It's nice to be in a community of other people who believe that, and I'm happy to share it. So that's all I will speak, and thank you.